Hello, everyone. Welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven. I am your host, as always. Joining me today are Alex and Tyler. If you're listening to this, you don't get to see Tyler's name, which is Raider Cody's undie pick. Tyler, how you doing, man?
I'm doing very well. I'm very happy knowing that Raider Cody can never say that Chargers fans don't exist because we definitely have proof that he tried to slide in the DMs of a Chargers fan.
Multiple Chargers fans, I would imagine. When there's one, there's many. And Tyler is officially blocked by Raider Cody, as is Alex. Alex, how you doing, man?
Steven, we need you to complete the trifecta. You got to tweet some stuff at Raider Cody so all three of us can get blocked.
If you are unaware of what's going on, just DM me or something and I'll fill you in. But here today to talk about the upcoming Chargers and Broncos rematch. As is the norm lately, unfortunately, we have to talk about who is on the COVID list and who is not. The Chargers did activate Michael Davis, Mike Williams, and Emeka Egbule today. Yesterday, they activated Joey Bosa and some others. So I think there are 9 players left on the COVID list as of now, at least according to our calculations. And Jeff Miller tweeted the same thing. So players currently on the COVID list still are Chris Harris, Nasir Adderley, Alohi Gilman, Andrew Brown, who is a practice squad player, Matt Overton. The Chargers did sign a long snapper to kind of fill in for that in case they need to. Dustin Hopkins, Trey Pipkins, Kenneth Murray, and Storm Norton. So the Chargers do have a chance to get most of these players back, according to Brandon Staley, including both of the offensive tackles, which would be rather interesting if the Chargers head into this matchup without any offensive tackles besides Rashawn Slater. So, Alex, what kind of stands out to you as the NFL is altering protocols, allowing more players to come back, and of course, who on the Chargers on the COVID list kind of stands out to you?
How the NFL changed protocols mattered a lot because we were talking about Mike Williams missing 2 games. If the previous 10-day protocol was in, we were talking about some other players missing games. In that case, I believe Chris Harris also. So, the fact that they did lift the 10-day protocol and now that most of those guys can come back is a huge feather in the Chargers' cap. And it definitely has, I think, people more optimistic going into the game compared to, what it would have been without Mike Williams, without Chris Harris, and without all those guys. So definitely a step in the right direction. Like you said, I'll be curious to see what they do if they don't have Storm Norton and Trey Pipkins, but I assume both will be back. You'll get the normal starting 5 on the line, or at least what the normal starting 5 has been. But the Broncos, I know, added a couple today. They added Bryce Callahan, who's always sort of been a pretty good defender against the Chargers. Had the Randy Moss interception against Mike Williams last year, which was not fun. So he's always been a pretty good defender. So that's a loss for them, and they're already down in the secondary with guys that are injured. So that's something to keep mind of, as the Chargers should get all of their wide receivers back this game. So that's going to be something to watch for Justin Herbert. But overall, it's good news on the COVID front. Hopefully in the next 48 to 72 hours, we don't get more positive tests, because if we do, then those guys are most likely out.
Yeah, after the Houston Texans loss, we were sitting here going, I don't know how the heck we picked the Chargers to win, A, after that loss, and B, with all the players that they're missing. Yet, thankfully they've been having players come off that list ever since the CDC came in through the clutch for the Chargers. I mean, the season was basically going to end after that Texans game, after that loss, because there was no way they were going to beat the Broncos or really even the Raiders if 20-something players were missing. Now we're down to 9 or whatever it is, and that's a huge deal. So the season is saved. Whether you agree or disagree with the decision by the NFL is a whole different thing. You have to admit, though, it saved the Chargers season and probably saved some other teams as well. So with players coming off, I feel a lot more confident about this game, particularly at home. The one I'm most interested in is Dustin Hopkins right now. I know they have Tristan Vizcaino off the COVID list, but we've seen that not play out so well. And then Hopkins has been nothing but, I mean, magic for them, honestly, since they joined the team in week 8.
Yeah.
You know, he's tied for Justin Tucker in field goal percentage. Raise your hand if you thought any Chargers kicker would ever do that since joining the team. You know, returners are only averaging 15 yards per return since week 8, which is amazing. He's got 38 touchbacks, which was supposed to be Tristan Vizcaino's thing. But here we are with Hopkins, the cast-off kicker, who's second in the NFL since joining the Chargers in touchbacks. So he's doing pretty well for them. And if they don't have him and they are struggling, you know, to stop anyone on defense, and they probably will struggle on offense, and it comes down to a kick, it's Tristan Vizcaino and a new long snapper. So it's going to be a little bit worrisome heading into this game against the Broncos for sure.
Yeah, you know, the Chargers are, of course, they've moved up the special teams rankings. You know, according to Football Outsiders, they're now 30th. They're not 32nd, which they were for a long time, and then 31st for a couple times. But the Broncos are 29th. So, you know, it's not like the Broncos are that good at special teams either, at least according to the DVOA ranking. So, you know, I expect it to be a close contested matchup, and it might come down to whose special teams can make a play or does not make a play. So special teams going to make an impact in this one. Alex mentioned Bryce Callahan. You know, the Broncos also placed Mike Ford, Bobby Massey, and Stephen Weatherly on the COVID list today. One of the other Broncos reporters said that Callahan, Massey, and Weatherly will all be out on Sunday. So that means that they are unvaccinated players. Bobby Massey did not play in the first matchup a couple weeks ago. But you know, he has hardly been that great. So, you know, that could be a feather in the Chargers cap heading into this one. So again, I think the most important thing from today is that the Chargers didn't place any new players on the list. If that can continue, then, you know, you get some of these players back. You know, I am curious to know who kind of is dealing with symptoms or not, you know, because you have Nasir Adderley and Chris Harris, who are two starting players in the secondary, which is a group that has been, you know, much maligned, and rightfully so, over the last couple of weeks. Daniel Popper pointed out that they've had 60 some odd combinations back there. So not having Chris Harris and Nasir Adderley and potentially Elohi Gilman in this one is huge, along with all the other things that you guys mentioned too.
Yeah, because we watched the Chargers get absolutely torched with whoever they were playing at corner last week. It was kind of a bloodbath. I forget what it was historically, but you know, the Chargers, as Arjun pointed out in his analytics video, their success rate on offense was the highest since of any game since 2018. The offense was moving pretty well, except for the turnovers, obviously, but the defense was absolutely garbage because those corners just could not keep up. So having someone like Davis, who really is their plus athlete and, you know, also a good corner, whereas Campbell's kind of just a good athlete and no longer really a good corner, it's huge for the team because, well, I'm not as scared of Drew Lock, let's just say that, but you know, it's still great to have Michael Davis back.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this Chargers defense as a group that's a little bit top heavy. Like it is, okay, well, you know, you have Joey Bosa and Derwin James and Michael Davis, and when you didn't have those three players last week, we saw what happened. So I also think it is a product of the secondary and the guys that they brought in on like short notice just not being that good. You know, I mean,
Right.
Isaiah Bassey obviously is coming off of the ACL injury. Devontae Harris is Devontae Harris based off his play last week. So to me, those guys just looked a little bit slow instinctually, and they're also not adjusted to the system after being in it for such a short period of time. So just getting guys that are A, better athletically, but B, know the system, I think is such a huge part if they do get Chris Harris back. Tavon Campbell, obviously coming back as well, I think is just such an important thing from athleticism, even though he's had a really up and down year in terms of coverage, like just getting him on one of those Broncos receivers and, you know, being sure that he's not going to get beat down the field. He might get beat on a move. I think that is definitely important from an athleticism standpoint in the secondary. So, we'll see what happens and which guys are able to come back. But I think if they get Chris Harris and Nasir Adderley back, that is definitely favorable for them, assuming they also get someone who's on the injury report with the hamstring and Derwin James. If they get him back as well, I think that they're in good position to handle Drew Lock in that offense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point too, right? Because, you know, against the Texans, of course, you don't have Brandon Cooks on that team, but no Michael Davis, no Tavon Campbell. Devontae Harris gets benched in the second half. So really you have Asante Samuel Jr. and, Chris Harris. And that was pretty much it on Sunday against the Texans. So at least getting some reinforcements at corner, and hopefully some of these guys can come back on the safety from the safety list. Of course, you have Trey Marshall was activated, I think on Monday. So if you can't get Nasir Adderley and Alohi Gillen back, then you're probably looking at Trey Marshall and Ben DeLuca and Derwin James potentially as the starting safety. So we'll talk about Derwin in a second, but obviously notable. Just really quickly for the offensive line, because I know a lot of people were asking me what's the solution if the two tackles are missing or if one is missing. Obviously, if one is missing, then you're fine. If both Trey Pipkins and Storm Norton are unable to play in this one, I think my preference would be kick Michael Schofield to right tackle and ideally bring in Brendan Hymas off the bench. I think we've all seen enough from Senor Clemente, but I'm more worried about the interior pass rush from the Broncos than I am the edge rushers. And so I understand a lot of people would want Matt Filer to kick out, but I think, keeping that left side intact, would kind of supersede that shuffling of things. So I think if the two tackles are out, I think the best solution is probably kick Michael Schofield to right tackle and bring in Brendan Hymas or Scott Quessenberry, or ideally not Senor Clemente, but I'll have to see what happens there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the guy we also have to mention from coming back from the COVID list is Justin Jones. I mean, they had trouble, that's putting it lightly, stopping the run last week. I think Daniel Popper put out a stat that when Justin Jones has been on the field, it's been 3.6 yards per carry. When he hasn't been, it's been 5.3 in recent weeks. So that's definitely a problem. I think that you get him back. Obviously, you get Joey Bosa back on that line too. And they're going to need to stop the run in this game. Like, Denver's not going to make any bones about what they're going to do. They're not going to sling the ball downfield with Drew Lock. I mean, maybe they'll have a couple design plays for him, but it's going to be Javonte Williams that you have to stop if you want to win this game and control the clock and get the defense off the field, which they were unable to do against Rex Burkhead. But we'll let that be what it is. I think getting Justin Jones back for this game is also huge, given their struggles in the run game.
Yeah, Stephen, what was Javonte Williams' missed tackle number this season?
Yeah, so he leads the league with 62 missed tackles force. He's fourth in the league in yards per contact per attempt, trailing only Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb, and Elijah Mitchell. So Javonte is an extremely talented running back, as is Melvin Gordon, who we've seen have some big games this year. So we'll talk a little bit more about stopping the run in a second, but to that point, against Houston, I wanted to bring up Austin Eckler's quote from Wednesday, because I took issue with that. And Austin Eckler is, I think he's one of the better players, at least on the Chargers, perhaps in the league. At his press conferences, he's so forthcoming. He's so knowledgeable. He is so personable. But when he said that, he was asked about the Houston game. Of course, he wasn't able to play in that game because of COVID. And basically what he said is that he felt like, they didn't have all their leaders there. They couldn't, get up for the game, maybe lacking motivation. I don't remember the exact quote, but just kind of paraphrasing there. And really, Brandon Staley did say that same thing essentially too, where he said that they lacked the energy, the intensity that you need on a weekly basis, and especially against a team who's going to run the ball at you. So I took issue with that. I know it's the Texans. I know it was after Christmas. But if you can't get up for a potential, this is essentially, Keenan Allen said today, the playoffs start now. The playoffs started last week for this team. They had the playoffs in their own destiny. They had it in their own grasp. And if you can't get up for any game in the NFL, let alone a game in which you can control your own playoff destiny, then what are you doing out here? And so it definitely showed, right? The lack of intensity was very noticeable from everybody not named Braden Fehoko. But I am not with Austin Eckler saying we didn't have most of our leaders. Derwin was there. I understand he's not playing, but Keenan was there. Justin Herbert was there. Matt Filer's there. Rashawn Slater, Kaiser White, Nasir Adderley. So you have all these players who are presumably leaders on this team. Chris Harris, of course. And I just took issue with that, man. I don't know what you guys' thoughts are there, but I did not appreciate Austin Eckler's quote about that particular game.
Yeah, it's incredible that they had a problem or a difficulty getting up. I mean, even Raider Cody's been trying to get up. Okay, that was my joke. For Eckler to come out and say that, and that it felt dead, and players had a hard time stepping up as leaders. Being a bad team is one thing. Ask the Lions, but they don't quit, and they just beat the Cardinals. I mean, the Texans, they're terrible. They're missing more players. I dare anyone to name 5 players on their front seven or offensive line, but they won. So the Chargers not showing up emotionally because it was too hard to step up. It's one of the most damning things I've heard about this team or seen from this team since like McCoy needing to be comforted on the sideline by Antonio Gates. I mean, even the Broncos, who were missing tons of offensive linemen last time, they showed up when they were missing players. Can the Chargers do that this week? I can't believe in a basically win, and not really, but win, and they would be in the playoff scenario. Nobody showed up, like, or at least emotionally and also physically on defense. I can't help but notice that James was on the sideline, but they had no defensive captains on the field, and perhaps Eckler was more referencing like the defense. But it was a surprise year from Eckler. I took issue with that as well. I'm surprised that he said it. We all saw it. Like, we all noticed it on the field. For him to come out and say that as well, hopefully that's, just a 1 week sort of thing and not a real culture issue, because it's not what I expected from this team. I thought a team that we said, I thought this team was past a loss like this and wouldn't have a kind of loss or a drop loss to the Texans like this, but to also hear that they emotionally and their hearts aren't in it outside of Braden Fehoko, maybe Justin Jackson, Justin Herbert, that's rough to hear. And that's not a postseason mentality.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not going to get up for the Texans, then, why should we? Which is why me and Tyler drank on the postgame show. But, it's struggling. It's tough to hear that too, because it's not just like, oh, well, we'll just take this Texans game off and then we'll get back next week. Like, the important part of the Texans game is it gives you margin for error, right? Like, if you get that win last week, you're 9-6. Of course, you control your own destiny and don't need the losses from the Ravens and the Dolphins that you do now. But also, like, it prevents, bad things from happening, right? Like, I'm not going to try to speak this into existence, but hypothetically, last week of the season, Justin Herbert test positive for COVID before the Raiders game, right? Are we all going to sit here and go, oh, well, wish they would have had that Texans game because now they're in this position where they're going to be starting Chase Daniel, right? Like, just hypothetical scenarios like that, or injuries that could happen this week, injuries that could happen against the Raiders. So you can kind of create those scenarios in your head, and it's just like why every game is important on the schedule, regardless of who the opponent is. And we said it on the live show. You have 20 players on the Texans that are out, and about the same number on the Chargers. So like the whole excuse that those guys weren't there just doesn't hold water for me. Even if you want to say that the Chargers were missing better players than the Texans were missing, obviously Texans have a bunch of dudes that are on 1-year contracts that are trying to like ball out, and it showed. Like, Desmond King played harder than anyone on the Chargers defense did. Like, that's the reality. As much as we burnt him and tried to say, oh, well, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are going to have a field day, or not Mike Williams, but Keenan Allen and Josh Palmer and all those dudes are going to have a field day, and they didn't, because Desmond King played well and played harder than anyone on the Chargers defense, unfortunately. So it is what it is. That game's in the past now, but yeah, that excuse that they didn't get up doesn't hold water for me. I don't care about COVID for very obvious reasons. I don't care that it was like Christmas or anything. But I just don't buy the whole we didn't get up for that game thing, because if you didn't, then don't bother going to the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. And just so the full quote, Austin said, quote, I talked to a couple guys and they said it just felt like dead almost. And rightfully so. We lost a lot of our leaders, a lot of people that bring a lot of energy. It's really hard to step up as far as being an actual leader in 1 week. So that was the whole quote from Austin Eckler. Again, that feels kind of damning to me. Like, the three of us were talking, and like if the offensive line had played poorly without Corey Linsley, I would have understood that. Like, Corey Linsley is the emotional leader. He is the guy who sets all the protection. But the offensive line was dominant. They played an awesome game against this Texans team. And again, not super talented, but still, the offensive line handled their business. And so one side of the ball struggled to get up and struggled to be motivated. The other one did not. And that's kind of just how it is. But talked a little bit longer about COVID and things like that than we had planned. So we'll dive right into this upcoming matchup. Before we do, want to give a shout out to our sponsor, TickPick, who is the official ticketing partner of the Guilty as Charged podcast. There's only 2 games left in the regular season, and then, of course, there are playoff games. So if you haven't been to a game yet, or if you need some extra help, use TickPick to purchase tickets to your next game. There's no ticket fees. And of course, if you use our link, tickpick.com/charged, you get a $10 discount. So please go use and support TickPick. That is the best way to get tickets, in my opinion. So that being said, let's dive into this upcoming matchup with the Chargers and the Denver Broncos, of course, at home. Oops. There we go. Live TV. All right. So Tyler, what's your big picture, biggest storyline that you're paying attention to this week as the Chargers prepare to host the Denver Broncos?
Yeah. So last time they played Denver, it was kind of the turning point of the it's all Lombardi. It can't possibly be Herbert, be Herbert crowd. And it wasn't really during the game or after the game when that passing chart went up. It's right around when Nate Tice said, "Oops, I watched the film. I actually think it was a pretty solid game from him. I have to back off my criticism." And I think at that point, people started to realize that Herbert is struggling versus 2 safety looks. And, it's not because guys aren't open or because the plays aren't there, although that is, something that does factor in. He's just either making the wrong read or the wrong decision or locking on to one player. Steven and I, we've been charting players and various stats of those players all year long. But we've also had Jason, who broke down that game versus Denver on our channel. He's been charting how Herbert has done versus each coverage, and 11 of his 14 interceptions this year have come against 2 safety looks. Now, I know that's not all on him, a ball bouncing off Eckler's hands, Cook's hands, someone running the wrong route, whatever. That's a whole different story. But still, that's how it's shaken out. And after really cutting it loose versus, the past 3 weeks, particularly that bomb to Jalen Guyton against Cincinnati or the amazing throw of the year against the New York Giants, that hesitation really kind of reared its ugly head against the Texans. And, one other thing that we've noticed and we've talked about on the side is that Herbert has chosen to scramble more since that Minnesota game where he struggled to read coverages. Yeah. And, from that Pittsburgh game on, he's more than doubled his number of scrambles per game since then. And, there are 3 potential reasons for it. And I think 2 are bad. One reason is, a good reason. He's being smart. There's one less defender in the box. So take advantage of that. Use your legs. He's an athletic guy. So that's good. But the 2 bad reasons, and it could be this, it's not good. He's either being coached to take off more because he can't read cover 2, or he just can't read cover 2, or at least any kind of 2 safety look, and he's taking off because it's currently a problem. It's not like just the Pittsburgh game where, he's taking advantage of a lighter box and he's getting 90 yards. It's not really like that anymore. That's the outlier, not the norm right now. It's a problem. And he's taken a higher rate of self-sacks and self-pressures per game than he was before. And the scrambling itself has just been a little off too. Sometimes he'll spin out of the pocket. Sometimes he'll slip. I don't know why his footing's been weird. I think 3 times he's tried to escape and he slipped. I don't know how often that happens with mobile quarterbacks. We're not used to seeing one, so I don't know what that looks like. And sometimes he has awful vision and he runs into his own guy or right into a blocked defensive lineman. And sometimes he just gets bailed out by a defensive penalty, so it doesn't go against him. But there's been multiple times this season he just I don't know where he's going. He kind of panics and runs into a defender. And, part of that's him not being used to this. He's not super comfortable with, and that's fine. But, so my main storyline is against what should be the defense of his nightmares in this Fangio defense in terms of personnel and scheme. Can Justin Herbert show growth and carry this team to a win and push towards the postseason?
Yeah, to talk about something, slightly different is, we don't know what version of it we're going to get. The run defense has just been really up and down this year. Mostly down, to be honest, if we're talking about the first half of the season. But there's been some kind of peaks and valleys, I think, in the second half. You had a pretty
Sure.
good game against the Patriots, then a bad game against the Eagles where they gave up 4.5 yards per carry, but got the win. An okay game versus Dalvin Cook. And then I think that's when the Chargers sort of started to turn the corner and was like, oh, are they like a league average run defense now? And then they get into this confusing stretch where if you look at their last 5 or 6 games, you have the Steelers game where they were up by 20 points. Didn't really give them much opportunity to run, right? Sort of a similar situation versus the Bengals and versus the Giants as well. Not to take away from those efforts on the ground, but the game script kind of eliminated the possibility of those teams running. Although the Giants kept running for whatever reason, I don't really know why they did that. But then they get gashed by the Broncos, which obviously was not very pretty with Javonte Williams in that game. They do get gashed by the Texans for 5.3 yards per carry last week. And of course, the Chiefs, that was a little bit more complicated because the Chiefs basically decided not to run the ball after Derwin left. And when, that's kind of smart on their part. So I think which version of the run defense shows up this week is really important, in addition to which version of Herbert shows up, because, that's going to control the game for the Chargers, right? I mean, they've done very well whenever they've tended to have a lot of time of possession, and the defense suffers whenever they have to be on the field for 35, 40 minutes a game, as we saw mostly last week against the Texans, in addition to the talent issues that existed there. So, obviously, we just talked about Justin Jones, Joey Bosa being back for this game, hopefully Derwin James as well. So that, is an immediate boost to your run defense outlook, particularly if Chris Harris and Nasir Adderley can play as well. That would also be a boost. But which version of it shows up, especially after they got toasted by the Broncos for 4.5 yards per carry last game, is going to be really important. So I'm focused mainly on the run defense because I don't think they're going to be able to get a ton done with Drew Lock. So that this kind of is what determines the game, in my opinion, in addition to obviously, what Herbert and the receivers in the offense are going to do.
Yeah, I think those are two, really good calls. As for the Herbert stuff, I think the scrambling, of course, when it works, it's a lot of fun. The Pittsburgh Steelers running for 90 yards, it's great, right? But there have been times where the pressure is non-existent and Herbert is, trying to leak out and gain some yards with his legs. And that is my ultimate pet peeve as an offensive line guy, is when a quarterback runs out of a clean pocket. If your name is Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson, sure, Kyler Murray too. If you can go get 20 yards on the ground, why not, right? But for the most part, quarterbacks need to stay in the pocket when there's no pressure. And I think that to me is not a concern, but it just kind of is an annoying trend I've noticed over the last few weeks from Justin Herbert. I expect him to play well. He has some Chargers history on the line over the next couple weeks in terms of being able to break the franchise record for touchdown passes, passing yards, and completions. I think he'll get there for those ones, but I expect him to play well, at least against the Raiders, who, he's played really well in his history, but he could certainly struggle this week. And so I think the thing that I'm focusing in on is how the Chargers are able to use Justin Jackson and Austin Eckler together. We haven't really seen the two of them be healthy at the same time really at all this season, because Justin Jackson was banged up early. Then Austin Eckler was banged up and had COVID. So this week presumably is the first week in a really long time where Justin Jackson and Austin Eckler are healthy at the same time. And so Justin Jackson has played really, really well over the last few weeks. We have obviously seen Austin Eckler have a ton of success, and I think the Denver Broncos defense can be had on the ground. And obviously, Alex is talking about the run defense and keeping the defense off the field, and being able to run the ball effectively is a great way to help a struggling defense. And so I think this is a good week for the Chargers to be able to kind of, experiment is, I guess, kind of the word I'm looking for with Justin Jackson and Austin Eckler, do some more of the pony package, get them both out there on the same time. We were all in agreement that Justin Jackson was the best player on the field last week on the team. So I'm excited to see what this running game looks like over the next 2 games and hopefully a playoff game, because they finally have found that number 2 back that we've been asking for all season long. And now Austin Eckler is healthy. And so that really is what I'm focusing on this week. They've done some really good things. Tyler and I were talking on Twitter yesterday about how they really embrace the counter plays and how they do a bunch of different things to set those up, be it from shifted line packages, heavy packages, even from, an empty package. So I love the way that the Chargers are running the ball recently. And I think this is a game where they could really kind of lean into it more than they have recently because of, Herbert's struggles versus this specific scheme and what Alex was talking about with the defensive struggles over the last few weeks.
Yeah, as far as counters go, I believe they've run, I think, 4 times as many counters this year than they did last year, which is, and it's working. It's looking really good. The Chargers ran it 39 total times against the Chiefs. I don't remember how many of those were running backs, but I think it was 27 or so. It must have been running backs. And yeah, with Herbert struggling, they need to run it a little bit more. And I think they should. I think it's a great thing for them to be building, even with some lineman pieces missing, like, Slater 1 week, Lindsey the next. The fact that this run game is, I don't want to say unstoppable, but right now it looks kind of unstoppable and frankly sets the tone. And, they could have put up 70 points a game just running the ball. The fact that they're doing that and their special teams is getting better heading into the postseason. That's why I want to see these guys in the postseason so bad, because this offense and really even some of the special teams, they're coming together. And so, yeah, if they lean, in the run game on this one, that's fine by me. If Herbert doesn't have to throw it 30 something times towards Patrick Surtain, that's fine by me. I know Alex is happy to hear that. Patrick Surtain is playing very, very well this season. But yeah, if they lean into the run game, that's completely fine with me. I know people will be, angry at it. Oh, put the ball in the hands of your best player. But like, the running game is really good, and it might be the best part of their offense come Sunday. And unlike last time where we had, Kelly got a couple of catches, Bradwell had a route, Jackson was just a special teamer, Filer was out. Now they do have that situation sorted out. Yeah. They do have Filer. This would be the game to implement and continue what you've been building with, 2 backs healthy for the first time since the Patriots game, really.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. Just having 2 running backs in Austin Eckler and Justin Jackson, I think, is going to be really big. And the fact that they can both play well at the same time, maybe you both put them in the receiving packages, and it eliminates you having to put Joshua Kelly on the field super often, and also eliminates you having to activate Larry Roundtree on game day, unfortunately. But yeah, no, I think having both of them playing at the level that they are, and mostly, like Tyler said, just running the plays to, play to their strengths, also I think is really important. Gotta say, shout out to Patrick Surtain, but no pick sixes this week though. You can save that for Chad Henne or whatever next week against the Chiefs, but no pick sixes this week against Justin Herbert. That I do not like.
No, definitely not. And it is going to be interesting to see, which Broncos secondary members are able to play this week, because Ronald Darby has not practiced this week. Neither has Kareem Jackson. And of course, we mentioned, Bryce Callahan earlier, who's going to be out. So Broncos secondary potentially in a bit of a tough spot. So let's get to some key matchups at X Factors. I'll start this one off. I think the key matchup for me is pretty obvious in this one, and that's the Chargers linebackers versus the Broncos running backs. Of course, we mentioned Javonte Williams and his game-wrecking ability as somebody who can break tackles and get out in space, and he forced 5 missed tackles the last time these two teams played, and frankly made the Chargers look rather silly on several tackle attempts. So it looks like Drew Tranquill is not going to be playing this week. He has not practiced. He has a lower leg injury of sorts. So whether it's shifting Kenneth Murray back there or inserting Eamon Ogbongbemiga or Nick Neiman, I need to see a good game from the linebackers. And, I've been on the Kaiser White train. I feel like it's been a couple weeks since we've seen like a big Kaiser White game. And I think this is as important of a spot for the Chargers linebackers because of the way that the Broncos want to play on offense. They're not going to let Drew Lock air the ball out, right? Like, Vic Fangio is kind of tired of the whole gunslinger thing that Drew Lock brings to the table. So they're going to want to run the football. They only had like 13 total yards rushing against the Raiders last week somehow. And so I think the Broncos are going to come out and really try and establish the run, really try and, shove it down the throats with Williams, with Melvin Gordon. And so I think this is a big game for the linebackers. And like I said, we don't know who's going to be playing opposite of Kaiser White, but I think we need to see a big Kaiser White game. We need to see whoever is playing next to him play really well. Amen Ogbongbemiga had a couple really bad missed tackles. There was a Royce Freeman run that went for like 20 yards that should have been an Amen tackle for loss. And so I'm curious to see how that kind of pans out. They kind of rotated Amen and Nick Niemann back there next to Kaiser, but this is a big game for the linebackers, and I think they've got to really be gap sound, assignment sound, and be able to, get into the backfield and put the Broncos behind the sticks, because if the Broncos are living in third and shorts, then this is going to be a long day again for the defense. And so, we saw what that looked like last week when the Texans had, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3 every single time. And the Broncos offense is much more talented than the Texans. So this is a big game for the linebackers and the rest of the run defense as a whole.
I can't believe the Broncos had 14 carries for 8 yards against the Raiders last week.
Wild.
That seems impossible with the two guys that they have, but okay. The whole Amen Ogbongbemiga thing, I still don't know why they have him in there over Nick Niemann. That's not a slight at Ogbongbemiga. It's just A, you drafted Niemann,
Sure.
and B, Niemann is a better tackler in my opinion, and C, Niemann is clearly a better athlete. If you look at his RAS score, Ogbongbemiga's isn't that great, and Niemann's isn't like the 90-somethingth percentile. So why they aren't playing him, especially after he does so well in special teams, I don't know. But to me, like, especially on that Rex Burkhead play that kind of broke the game at the end there, I think Nick Niemann would have made that play. And again, it's a woulda, shoulda, coulda, woulda, and maybe he would have missed that tackle. But he's a pretty sure tackler through college, and he looked good in the preseason. I don't think he misses that play. Now, would they have won if Niemann were on the field? I don't think so. But I think if Tranquil is out, you should really give him a shot too, because you like that Ogbongbemiga can blitz too, but Niemann is faster. So I'd rather have someone out like there out instead of him. And as far as the run defense goes, that's also my key matchup, just a little bit different. I'm just looking at the 2 first-round picks. That's Jerry Tillery and Kenneth Murray versus the run, which has not been good. That is really not their thing. But their run stop rate,
it's not their thing.
I don't know if Kenneth Murray has a lot of things at this point that he's good at.
No, they're not good. The run stop rate with Murray at edge the last 3 weeks and Tillery for the whole year, they rank 102nd and 109th. And that's with snap count qualifiers, not just every player who's ever played. 102nd and 109th in run stop rate. Tillery's played okay recently, particularly against the Chiefs. There is something there. I think he's improved. I think he's flashed, like Staley said. But overall, those two are a big fat liability in the running game. Now, Murray might not play. It depends how the COVID listing shakes out. But the way guys are trending, I think he could. Like I said in our recap of the Houston game, if I were watching Murray play edge like this in college, I probably would have given him a day 3 grade. These two duds, first round dud picks, just gave up 149 yards to Rex Burkhead and barely made any impact in the run game. They have to. Somebody has to step up in this game. Part of the reason, I think someone did a breakdown, I can't remember who it was. It's part of the reason the Raiders did such a good job against the Broncos in the run game is because their defensive line showed up. They showed up. And, Jerry Tillery has to. And we could talk about some other players later on. But for me, my eyes are on these 2 first-round picks because they're bad against the run and they need to be good.
Yeah, I think my X factor for this game is actually going to be Keenan Allen. I think that last week he sort of gets shut down versus the Texans, 4 receptions, 35 yards. Obviously, those numbers kind of speak for themselves. I think he's been sort of up and down over this last stretch. Obviously, the Cincinnati game script didn't necessarily favor him, but he did have, I believe, 5 receptions for 34 yards in that game. And you actually have to go back to his last Denver game. Obviously, he missed the one against the Giants, but that was the last time that he had 80 yards in a game. The last couple weeks, it's been 34, 78, and 35. So I think his production sort of needs to pick up as well, just to get him, more in tune with Justin Herbert. Obviously, communicating more on third downs, which the Chargers have been doing a good job regardless on third downs recently.
Yeah.
But I think, the offense is still sort of a whole nother level when they do have Keenan Allen working the way that he's supposed to. Plus, I think we talked about Ronald Darby, who is currently injured for the Broncos, and they have a couple other injuries in the secondary, in addition to the Bryce Callahan COVID situation. So this is kind of a week where you would expect Keenan Allen to pop off. I don't know what adjustments they're going to make if Ronald Darby can't play, if that involves putting someone like Patrick Surtain on Keenan Allen, or trying to shift things around. But to me, this is a game where you also have Mike Williams back. He's going to take attention away for the defense for the Broncos defense as well. So to me, this is a game where I think Keenan Allen should step up.
No, absolutely. I think that's a good call. Did you have a key matchup too, Alex?
Oh, well, did I go with my X Factor first? Whoops.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I think you guys have kind of covered the key matchups. Really, I do think it is kind of the run defense. I will say Chargers special teams versus Broncos special teams. Like we've said earlier, if the Chargers are getting Andre Roberts back, and we'll see with Dustin Hopkins, although it doesn't seem like he'd be likely to go. But that depends on his vaccination status and the 5-day rule. Now that they've activated that, I mean, they should still be okay. But assuming they have Vizcaino, and that's going to be an interesting field goal situation, depending on what calls they decide to make there. I assume that means you get a lot of 4th and Staley and in those kind of scenarios. But if they have Hopkins, then they could sort of play it out like they did against the Texans last week and take those field goals early on if they're available. I'll go with special teams. In addition to the punting unit, hasn't got a lot. Chargers didn't punt a lot last week, but there's been some shaky moments where they've gotten pressure on Ty Long, unfortunately, just because of bad blocking. So that can always come back to haunt them. We've seen that a couple times this year. So, I will say Chargers special teams, and which players are going to be in those key spots of punt returner, kicker. Obviously, we know Ty Long is going to be punter, but also does the punt blocking show up too?
Yeah, that's a big question mark if the Chargers have to punt a couple times. They haven't really punted all that much recently, but it hasn't been pretty. Want to give a shout out to our guy NV Talent for the super chat question. I wanted to acknowledge that. We'll get to that question and some other questions at the end of the show, but we'll jump back in. So, Tyler, who is your X Factor of the day?
It's been long overdue to take this player. He potentially will not be active because of who returns. I have to go with Braden Fehoko. He's been inactive a little bit because of roster construction.
Yeah.
But let this sink in for everyone listening. He, among any player at any position with at least 50 run defense snaps, has a higher run stop rate than any of them. Any defensive tackle, edge rusher, linebacker in the NFL, whatever. It's the highest run stop rate by an interior defensive lineman since 2007. It's currently higher than any rate that Jamal Williams had. Granted, that was as a starter, but still,
right.
He was an undrafted free agent last year. He was cut by the team in the preseason. They had him drop weight, and he was on the practice squad. Then they called him up a few times, and instant impact. They signed him to the active roster, and he leads the NFL in run stop rate. Oh, and by the way, they had Rumph out for that game, and so they have Fehoko, a 300-something pound nose tackle, lead blocking on kickoff return, and he's just destroying guys out there. And he looks way better at that than Rumph did through the first half of the season.
Yeah.
So to me, and this whole Tillery, Fehoko, the interior defensive line room is a whole offseason story we can get into one day. Yeah. But I want to see this coaching staff reward good play, reward effort, being the only guy out there to really show heart on defense. And oh, by the way, because you're such an analytics driven team, trust the stats, because Fehoko's run stop rate, granted it is, lower snaps than most of the starters, obviously. It's almost double, Linval Joseph's. It's, quadruple Jerry Tillery's. Reward this play. This is how you find an Austin Eckler or an Adrian Phillips. And I actually don't even know if they're going to have him active on game day, but I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I think the defensive line group is going to be a very interesting offseason topic, right? Because Linval Joseph, ever since he came back from COVID, his production has plummeted. He was before he got COVID, his pass rush win rate was like 6th or 7th highest among all defensive tackles. Now it's dropped all the way down to like 4%. He has 1 or 2 run stops in the last 3 weeks after being one of the most disruptive run stopping defensive tackles in the league. Justin Jones, of course, Alex mentioned the statistic that Popper pointed out, how important he is. And then Jerry Tillery has been objectively bad against the run. I think he's improving, but it's probably slightly at best. So I don't understand, I know why, right? But I don't understand, you look at this run defense that is objectively bad, and all the statistics that you could possibly look at do not paint a good picture for the Chargers. They've improved, right? Like Alex was saying, they're not 32nd in the league anymore. I think they're 28th. Their rush defense DVOA is 29th or 30th. So they're not the worst in the league anymore. But you have this possible solution. And I thought it was really funny because Brandon Staley said, verbatim on Monday that he felt like they didn't have the intensity, they didn't have the energy that was required of that specific matchup. And then he was asked about Braden Fehoko on Wednesday, and he was like, yeah, I love the energy and intensity that he brings. He brings it every single time that he plays, he brings it every single practice. That's who he is. And I'm like, all right, coach, maybe lean into giving that guy more snaps. Maybe that helps your poor run defense if you could play, Fehoko at the 3 technique, Linval Joseph or Christian Covington at the nose, maybe switch those up, and then Justin Jones. That's significantly better than what you are doing with Jerry Tillery, who's playing 85% of the snaps. So I'm not asking for Braden Fehoko to be a starter, and I don't think Tyler is either. I think it would be fun, but just give him more snaps than I think he had 12 or 13 run snaps last week, and he had 4 run stops. So he's incredibly productive, but he's not playing a whole lot. So let's get that guy some more snaps. I think that helps everybody stay fresher as well. So I think that's a good call. So my X factor of the day is going to be Trey McKitty. I have been pounding the table for him as a run blocker. I think he's really coming to his own and flashing some high level. Did I have him as the X factor last week? I think I might have actually. This is really giving me some deja vu.
Yes, but we did lose to the Texans. You're not back in time.
All right, I'll just keep going with Trey McKitty, I guess. But I'm gonna focus in here more as a receiver because I think we are continually seeing Jared Cook not be reliable, or Jared Cook, as Alex said earlier this year. So I think this really should be the last 2 games kind of transitioning into giving Trey McKitty some more opportunities as a receiver. He's looked really good in the few opportunities that he has had. So I was just talking about rewarding Braden Fehoko. I think we should be rewarding Trey McKitty as well, because I think he really is the future of the position for this team, and I think he deserves more opportunities to make plays in the passing game.
You have to give him some sort of run because if you're moving on from Cook next year, and honestly, we don't know what Parham's career is going to be like. He's out for the season already.
Yeah.
I don't know if he'll retire. But he's not under contract next year. You have to see what you have because Steven Anderson is so good in his role, but his role right now is not that inline tight end running routes or in the slot or whatever it is. He's just kind of like that fullback, tight end hybrid. So yeah, getting McKitty involved would be great. If I'm not mistaken, wasn't the Broncos game his first target of the year?
That sounds right to me. Yeah.
Sure. Whatever. But yeah, getting him more involved would be great. I mean, the tight end group, the ones that can actually develop still, has developed so well under this regime. And I would love to see McKitty get more reps as a receiver, get more run as a receiver, and not just a shallow crosser when Justin Herbert bootleg sort of thing. Target him deep. I mean, they had a couple deep shots to him in the scrimmage, against throwing, towards Derwin James. He didn't throw it, sorry, but he was running around, towards Derwin James. Go for it. Why not? I mean, the guy is killing people in the run game, as a blocker. Give him a shot. Give him a couple of shots, see what you have, because you could be down to only McKitty on your team next year. Not really, but of the guys that are currently on the team, he's the only one under contract.
Yeah.
My X factor is whether Jared Cook wants to run routes this week or whether he would like to not. I don't blame him for not doing work for $6 million. That seems like a great deal, but it would help the offense if he could do his job since he doesn't have to block anyway and also catch the ball. Those would both be beneficial things to the Chargers. If not, then yeah, I'm sort of in favor of it anyway, but more Trey McKitty, more Steven Anderson, more of anything that isn't Jared Cook. But unfortunately, because of the Donald Parham situation, they are sort of in this position where they have to play him as that receiver. So hope for the best. But yeah, no, the Parham injury unfortunately has taken a lot of that positive energy I think that the tight end group had out of it.
No, yeah, we'll have to see how that pans out, of course. So, all right, let's get into some of our bold predictions. I'll start this one. I mentioned the Justin Herbert statistics that he needs to kind of break some records. He is very close to breaking the touchdown record, kind of close for the yards and the completions. I'm going to say that he breaks Philip Rivers' touchdown record in the first quarter on Sunday. I think the Chargers are going to need to get out to a hot start. That's we've joked a bunch on this show that their best run defense is getting a big lead, and I think the Chargers do that. I think they get off to a hot start. I think we see Justin Herbert throw 2 touchdowns in the first quarter and break Philip Rivers' record.
Wow. All right, Alex, go for it.
Yeah, no. Tyler wants to go last this time. He must have a doozy of a bold prediction. We'll see. I'm gonna go Mike Williams 100 yards and a touchdown. I think he comes back from the COVID list this week. I think Justin Herbert will get him involved. And now that the Broncos are sort of they're going to kind of try to investigate and see if they have some guys that can really stick with Mike Williams. Don't really know if they have pieces that can consistently do that on a play-to-play basis now with how their secondary is. I think the secondary is going to be very focused on Keenan Allen in particular for this game. So, and we saw what the difference was between when Justin Herbert has Mike Williams on the boundary and he can just throw it up to him versus when he has Jason Moore on the boundary. No offense to him. But yeah, I think the offense is definitely a lot better with Mike Williams. I think he'll get more involved this week than he has been in some of the previous games before the COVID list. So I think this is sort of another breakout game potentially for him.
Yeah, it wasn't a doozy. I just didn't want to go second, so I don't really have anything like super interesting to share. My bold prediction is that the Chargers running backs have more total yards combined than Justin Herbert has passing yards.
Yeah, I think that would include receiving yards. Yeah.
Yeah, which kind of screws me, but whatever.
I think it's totally possible. I think we could have some big games from those two for sure. All right, let's get into some of our league picks. Alex, why don't you tell our listeners about ExpressVPN and update us on the standings for our league picks?
Yeah, you can go to expressvpn.com/guilty. We did an expressvpn.com/guilty ad earlier in the season when John Gruden got fired live. So I will dedicate this ExpressVPN ad to our dear friend, Raider Cody. If you want to see Raider Cody's football team ball out and maybe... it's going to be a little bit difficult, but I think Derek Carr and those guys can have a good game. You'll be able to see all of the replays on all 22. And much like Cody slides into the DMs, hopefully the Raiders aren't sliding into the end zone. So I hope that you go to expressvpn.com/guilty, where you can get a 3-month free trial of ExpressVPN. And now let's talk about the standings, because with 2 weeks left, we have a tie at the top. Steven is 33-15. I am 33-15. And Tyler is close. He's 6 games out with 6 games remaining. He could still, if me and Steven go 0-6 here, Tyler's got a chance, which is amazing considering what Steven's record was before Tyler took over. So, again, you can go to expressvpn.com/guilty. But who has got it this week? Boys, I think it's Tyler first, or...
I believe so, yeah.
It is Tyler, then me, then Steven. So take it away, Tyler.
Interesting. Yes, it's kind of a bummer that as soon as I turn over my record to Steven, I've gone like 15-0 or whatever. So I would have run away with this thing, but oh well. Okay, cool. I get to go first. So I'm going to take the Bills over the Falcons. Listen, I'm gonna take some gimmies. I gotta, pad my stats here. If I get within like 3 games of either of you guys, I'm stoked. So that one, then I'll take the Bucks over the Jets. That feels pretty good too. And then for upsets, I'm going to take. I should go with some offense, like Bengals over Chiefs. That's not a bad one, but I'm going to go with what's going to screw me over in the end. But whatever. Dolphins over Titans in this one.
Oh, that would be not fun.
All right, yeah. I would not like Dolphins over Titans, but that is definitely a possibility for what could happen. I'm doing it again. Carson Wentz and the Indianapolis Colts defeat the Las Vegas Raiders. They're 6.5-point favorites, and I've been riding with the Colts, so I'm going to continue to ride with the Colts. Tyler, you didn't pick Pats Jags, did you?
No.
All right, I will take Patriots over Jaguars. I do not think Bill Belichick loses that game to the Jaguars in New England. It just doesn't seem feasibly possible. Even less possible than the Cardinals-Lions one that I lost. But I don't think there's any real chance of that happening. As for the upset pick, this is the one where it always gets a little bit dicey. But I'm gonna go out on a limb here. Wait, actually, are there actually any good upset picks? Because a lot of these games are like 58-point spreads, which is not great opportunity if you're trying to pick an upset. I'll go with one that's a little bit out there, but I could see it happening. I will take the Carolina Panthers over the New Orleans Saints. I think that the Saints have had some quarterbacking troubles. There's Taysom Hill. There's Ian Book, who was in last week. I could kind of go either way. I could see either team taking it, but I'll take the Panthers to get a weird Sam Darnold, Cam Newton, PJ Walker, whoever the quarterback is, win over the New Orleans Saints. Saints have just really been struggling on offense, and I don't see them correcting those issues this week. So I'll take the Panthers over the Saints in my upset. And as for my 2 favorites, I will take the Patriots and the Colts.
Tyler, which 2 favorites did you choose?
Bucks and Bills.
Bucks and Bills. All right, so I'm going to take the Niners over the Houston Texans. That game's in San Francisco. I know Jimmy G is potentially hurt, but I think the Niners run game is just kind of clicking. Defense is nasty. Then I'm going to take the Dallas Cowboys over the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals really struggling without DeAndre Hopkins, and the Cowboys defense is nasty. And as for the upset pick, I'm going to take the Pittsburgh Steelers over the Cleveland Browns. Just feels like a Big Ben send-off kind of game. I think we see Big Ben kind of, he mentioned that this is probably his last game at Heinz Field. So I think we see a good Big Ben game. Like I said, I think just kind of a weird game, like Alex was saying with the Panthers. But so I think the Steelers stay semi-alive in the playoff picture and get a win over the Cleveland Browns.
Well, good luck with that, guys. It's probably a smart move to not pick the Bengals for the upset because they're so volatile on offense. So this could be the week that they're bad on offense. So good call.
I know. I saw a certain major network was talking about which quarterback they would rather have, and instead of Burrow versus Herbert, it was Burrow versus Patrick Mahomes, and the network was all choosing Joe Burrow. So
all right, I gotta be honest. Why do you guys do this to yourselves? Why do you watch like ESPN and FS1 and then go, "This is stupid"? Yeah, because they're stupid. Like people sent me that Chris Broussard clip where he was talking about Chargers fans or whatever, and I'm like, Chris Broussard talks about basketball, and they make him talk about football because they have to fill up 24 hours of content. Why are you guys surprised that it's bad? So like, please stop watching ESPN. Only watch us. All right, only watch us and like the Pat McAfee show and whatever else there is. Just stop watching the mainstream media.
Yeah, for the record, I was not watching. I just saw the clips on Twitter. So
I don't have cable, so
that's how they get you. They get you by posting that Orlovsky shit or whatever on Twitter, and then everyone goes crazy. You just got to stop feeding the content machine.
Yes, absolutely. So, all right. So we'll get to our predictions for the Chargers and Broncos game, and then we'll talk about the playoff picture for the AFC, as well as taking some questions for a little bit. But let's get our predictions for this specific matchup. Alex, why don't you kick us off here?
Yeah, I mean, coming off of the Texans game, I did not expect to be saying this, but I'll take a Chargers win.
no fucking way. I did not think you were gonna pick a win.
Me neither.
No. I mean, if the 10-day COVID rule was not in effect or was still in effect, and Mike Williams and Chris Harris and all those guys were out, I would have a worse feeling about this game, and that's sort of how I felt coming off of the Texans game. So I think the Chargers get it done. The Broncos are a little bit of a skeleton team themselves with a lot of the injuries they have, and obviously Teddy Bridgewater's not playing, so I think that's a disadvantage for them. And so I think the Chargers can pressure Drew Lock at a reasonably decent rate. I think that there's going to be guys that I hope they get up for this game. I think that they will get up for this game. It is kind of this is the playoffs, or you're not going to get in if you lose this game. Although there's like one scenario where they can get in at 1-1, but it doesn't matter. You're not going to get in the playoffs if you lose this. So I think the Chargers win rather decisively. I'll take it. The Chargers 30-21.
Wow.
I think that they show why they are kind of one of these teams that can go for the playoffs. I can't believe they got me to buy in again with all that COVID shit. But anyway, I do think they rebound from the Texans game. I feel like a lot of the captains on this team, as we've talked about, feel the need to get back into the swing of things, get a win here, and then move on to the Raiders for what could potentially be an end of season playoff game. So I will take the Chargers 30-21.
Wow, I am shocked that the tables are turning because I am not going to pick the Chargers to win this game.
Wow.
I'm pulling an Alex because I cannot in good consciousness predict that this team bounces back after what they put on the field last week against the Houston Texans. So I am very concerned about the Broncos rushing attack. And, we've seen Justin Herbert struggle against cover 2 looks. And so I think the Chargers will play a much cleaner game than the one that they played in Denver. Playing at Denver has just been super weird for this Chargers team. They've only won 2 games in Denver since 2011. So that's a struggle that hopefully Brandon Staley can overcome in the future. But I just think that this Broncos team gives them some tough matchups, really kind of at the positions that you really can't afford to have that. I think Patrick Surtain and that secondary, depending on who is playing there, is an advantage in this one. So the Chargers should win, man. Like this is a game that the Chargers should win. We've seen them bounce back after losses before, but I can't pick them after what they did against the Houston Texans. I just can't do it. Rex Burkhead runs for 150. He's the AFC Player of the Week, and now you go up against Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon. So I'm concerned about this one. I think the Chargers should win. I think they have the better players. I think they have the better coach, but I'm just concerned, man. I don't know what to make of this team right now. So I think my prediction is going to be Broncos win 20-17.
Wow. I don't even know what to say after the surprises. I didn't expect Alex to pick a decisive victory for the Chargers and then Steven to pick a loss. Although I understand the loss more than a giant decisive victory. But the good news is Drew Lock is playing and it's not Teddy Bridgewater. I think that already changes the outlook of the game. I think these new COVID protocols, whatever, that changes the outlook of the game. I think the Chargers hopefully getting the rest of their guys back helps. Obviously, I think having Matt Filer helps. You can already tell where I'm going with this, but I'll keep talking. Justin Jackson looks pretty good. I think they have most everything sorted out. This offense has scored 32 points per game in the last 4 weeks. I think they're moving. Granted, now it is the Broncos, and it is a difficult matchup for Herbert. but I think they can pull it off. I think not playing at Denver is a whole different thing. The reason that I think we picked him to win at Denver, but it's Denver and they just don't win. Now we're at home. And I think the Chargers will pull it off. It's going to be very, very close. The idea the Chargers can score another 30 points, I think, is a tad ridiculous unless they get a pick six. So I'm going to go a very, very close one. The Chargers win 21-20.
Wow,
Yeah,
I'm the optimistic one this week. Let's go. Maybe it's just the adrenaline in my brain, seeing Justin Jones coming off the COVID list and Mike Williams coming off. Maybe I'm functioning off of that, but I do think they turn it around this week.
Like I said, I think that they can. I think that they should win. I just don't know how to pick that, predict that performance after what they did last week. So, as for the playoff picture, I know a lot of people had some questions about this, so we'll get into it. The Chargers obviously have to win this game. Like Alex said, there are some wacky scenarios where the Chargers could go 1-1 and still get in. But obviously, losing to the Texans makes this game that much more important. So the easiest way that the Chargers get into the playoffs is that they go 2-0 down the stretch, and the Dolphins and the Ravens each lose a game. So the Dolphins play the Titans. They were Tyler's upset pick of the week, unfortunately. And then they host the Patriots for their season finale. So the Dolphins, of course, on a 7-game win streak against like the easiest schedule I've ever seen. And then the Baltimore Ravens are very banged up. We'll see what happens with Lamar Jackson. It doesn't look like he's going to play this week. So unfortunately, that means I'm going to have to root against my guy, Tyler Huntley, as they play the Los Angeles Rams. And then they close the season with the Pittsburgh Steelers at home. So a couple tough games for both teams. But again, that's the easiest way for the Chargers to get into the playoffs. Go 2-0, and have the Dolphins and the Ravens each lose one game.
I'm weirdly potentially more worried about the Raiders game than I am this Broncos game. I think there's going to be a lot of emotion for the Raiders with the passing of John Madden, and that's going to be their first home game since that passing. That's going to be a big deal for that team. I believe when Al Davis passed, they played a game against a very good Texans team and upset them at their next home game. So, I'm hoping that doesn't happen again, but that kind of emotion is a big deal. And again, if the Chargers show up flat and without emotion, a very emotional home team looking to play spoiler and get revenge, who can run the football, I think they have a chance to beat the Chargers. But yeah, Chargers can win out. They can still get in. I would love to see this team get in. I do think that they get the help that they need. I just don't know if they win both games. But if they win this game, I'll feel pretty confident about that second game.
Yeah, and I think it's just also important so they get. Their path is pretty simple. I do think the Ravens probably drop one of those two games, and I think the Dolphins probably drop one of those two games. So at this point, I think you just phase whatever else happens or has to happen in the AFC out of your head and just go 2-0. Like that's the simplest way to get in the playoffs. As obviously they do have to still lose those games, but my concern with the Chargers is just that they haven't been able to put two wins together. We saw that with the Giants and the Bengals, and they have the early 3-game winning streak leading into that Raiders win. But they haven't put, it's been kind of 1-1 every 2 weeks, right, for this team in recent history. So I'm just going to say that, it's going to be a challenge, obviously, because the Broncos and Raiders are both still playing for stuff, right? The Raiders can still make the playoffs. The Broncos can still make the playoffs. And on top of that, they're playing for jobs as well with Vic Fangio, trying to still remain head coach, and Rich Bisaccia also, trying to kind of get into consideration, or even like Tyler said, we thought Gus Bradley would become the Raiders head coach, but still, he's probably going to interview for the Raiders job at some point. So, he'll want to show out in these last two games as well. So both teams still have a lot of to play for, but yeah, like we've been saying, the path is simple: win 2 games. If you don't win 2 games, you're out.
Yeah, I know that there were a lot of people on Twitter suggesting that, the Broncos are kind of out of it. Vic Fangio is probably on his way out. So like some people were suggesting that the Broncos might not bring it this week, and I think I think Vic Fangio has proven that time and time again that he is able to motivate and get his guys up. And last year they were significantly worse. They were a significantly worse team, and even at the end of the season, they were still playing hard. You could argue if Jerry Jeudy doesn't drop the ball 5 times against the Chargers, the Broncos could have won that game last year. So I expect the Broncos to play hard. I don't know how good it's going to be. I don't expect them to get a pick 6 this week. So I think this is a tough 2-game stretch, and it sucks that they lost to the Texans last week because that would have given them some wiggle room. But we've seen the talent on this team proves that they can absolutely win these 2 games and get into the playoffs. At this point, they're playing for the 7 seed. But if they are able to get into the playoffs, I think that's huge for this team. Get Justin Herbert and company their first playoff appearance, and I think we all agree that would be exceeding preseason expectations. But yeah, I just can't in good consciousness expect them to win after what they did on Sunday against the Texans.
I can in bad consciousness expect them to win. I'll do that for you.
There we go. So like Alex said, there are some other wacky scenarios, but the path is simple, right? Win them the last 2 games, have the Dolphins and the Ravens each lose a game, and you're in. You get to be a part of the dance and see what happens. You're probably playing the Tennessee Titans at that point, unless the Chiefs lose to the Bengals this week or the Broncos the week after that. But it seems like the 2 seed is wrapped up with the Tennessee Titans right now.
Please, Chargers, I need you to make the playoffs so we can delay free agency and mock draft season where people ask the same 5 questions every week for 1 more week. Let's just get to the wild card game and go from there.
Yeah.
I kind of want to hit draft season. Not yet, but I'm actually getting excited. I'm seeing everyone post the clips of their sleeper this or that, and I'm excited to get into it.
No, this is going to be a super fun offseason because you have the 11 picks and you have potentially $80 million in cap space. So not there yet, but the juices to get into draft film is definitely cranking up right now. So we'll get to that down the road. So Alex, Tyler, final thoughts before we head out today.
I'll be at that game. Don't know who I'm going with yet, but I'll be at the game for sure. See you guys there.
Yeah. Just gotta win this game, go forward, and hopefully they make the playoffs. And I don't want to drink again on a show, so please show up, Chargers, so we can get some good energy heading into the show. So Steven's not the only one who's not drinking. So let's get this win.
Yes, I take your dog. Yeah, take Galadriel to the game and see what happens. That'd be so funny. But it's gonna be a good weekend. Hopefully for me, Utah's in the Rose Bowl on Saturday. Chargers playing the Broncos in a must-win game. So hopefully a fun weekend. Hopefully a positive result weekend that I'll be able to.
Rutgers is in the Gator Bowl, baby. We're gonna lose to Wake Forest by like 40, but it's fine.
Should be a fun one for sure. That being said, that's going to do it for us today, guys. We are going to be doing there's Galadriel. I won't show you guys Sully because we had to get him shaved, but it's sad. But so we are going to be doing a Q&A tomorrow. Like I said, I'm heading down to Pasadena on Saturday, so we're doing a Q&A tomorrow morning. So hopefully you guys can see us again then. But that being said, that's going to do it for us tonight, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.